In this video, we'll show you how to replace the brake master cylinder on your Ford F-150. This is located in the engine bay and part of the brake system. Let's get started. We can go ahead and pull off the connector for the wiring harness, press in on the tab, and pull backwards. Now make sure you check all of your terminals for any corrosion or damage. These look good. We have 3 hose clamps. Go ahead and loosen those up so we can remove the Y pipe from the intake. You can leave the Y pipe in here, but I find it's much easier to give yourself room and just pull the Y pipe out. All 3 hose clamps use an 8mm. We can set this off to the side. In order to set the airbox and coolant reservoir off to the side, we need to remove these 2 bolts. In order to get to those, we have to remove this bracket. We can use a 10mm. We can set this off to the side, and that gives us access to our hardware. Now we can go ahead and remove the 2 13mm bolts holding the entire bracket in. Now with those bolts out, there's a couple of grommets down bottom that you'll need to pop this out of, just like that. And then you want to be careful, as there is a rubber shroud on the back side that the intake goes through. You want to make sure that comes out without damaging anything. Now we can just set this off to the side, and that'll give us access to our master cylinder. To remove the connector from the master cylinder, there's a tab on the underside. Push in on the tab and pull out. You want to make sure you check these for any corrosion or damage. These look good. Before we open our reservoir, it's good to clean around the area with the cap. I'm just going to use a little bit of brake cleaner. You don't want to get any dirt or debris inside the brake reservoir. Now we can go ahead and remove our cap. Set that off to the side. And before breaking free our lines, we want to drain the master cylinder of any fluid. We're going to go ahead and pull that out. I'm just using a manual puller here. You can certainly use a vacuum puller if you have one. You want to be very careful not to get any of the brake fluid on any of the paint of your vehicle, as it's very corrosive. You want to make sure you have a fluid receptacle underneath, and I also have some rags here to catch the fluid as it goes down. There we go. To remove the manifold from the brake booster, we have a little plastic tab on either side on top of the stud. We just need to pull that off, and that gives us access to our 13mm nut. I'm going to use a socket to remove that. With that one removed, we can do the same on the other side. With both the nuts removed, we can go ahead and pull the master cylinder off of the brake booster. Before installing your master cylinder, you want to lubricate the O-ring that will sit up against the booster. And go ahead and install the nuts to hold the master cylinder to the booster. Now we can torque these to 18 foot-pounds. We can reinstall the plastic tabs on either side of the master cylinder back onto the studs. Before we can hook up our brake lines, we need to bleed the master cylinder itself. To do that, I have a couple of lines here, this plastic line in front and the copper line in back. They're going to act as a bench bleed basically. This is going to get all the air out of the fluid before we send it through the rest of the system. We'll go ahead and top off the reservoir. You want to be very careful when pouring the brake fluid, as it's very corrosive and can eat away at paint. If you do get any brake fluid on your paint, immediately get some water on it because that'll soak it up. For this, we're actually going to go a little bit past the max line. That way we can see the air bubbles right up top. Now you're going to want to go ahead and depress your brake pedal. You want to do this slowly though. And let out on the pedal slowly as well. Keep doing this until you have no more air in the system. Make sure your brake fluid is up to the max line on the reservoir, and you can reinstall your cap. Then we can reinstall our lines. The bigger fitting of the two lines goes in the back. We can go ahead and tighten these down. These need to be snug enough to make a seal, but you don't need to over tighten these. Now we can go ahead and use a little bit of brake clean to clean up this area. We can plug our electrical connector back in. Make sure that's fully seated and won't pull back out. And we can go ahead and get our coolant reservoir and air box back in its place. Make sure that any of the hoses are routed the way that they were originally. We can line up the outboard edge of the intake box. Line up the bolt holes and make sure that it is facing down towards the grommets. Once it is, we can push down and get that into place. With the air box and reservoir in, we can go ahead and install our bolts. Go ahead and snug these down. These don't need to be too tight. Go ahead and get our intake Y-pipe back together. We'll tighten down all three of the hose clamps, making sure that the hoses won't come off. You don't want to over tighten these though, as you can strip out the hose clamp. We can get our electrical connector for our MAF sensor back in. And we can go ahead and get our hood sensor bracket back installed. That doesn't need to be too tight, just snug that down. Before opening the master cylinder, we're going to clean it down with a little bit of brake parts cleaner and wipe down the area. That way we don't get any debris in our master cylinder. We can remove the cap. And we're going to remove as much fluid as we can from the master cylinder before starting our bleed procedure. You want to have a receptacle nearby to empty your fluid out of whatever you use to remove the fluid from the master cylinder. Now that we've emptied our master cylinder of the old fluid, we'll put some new fluid in. We'll fill it right up to the max line. And we'll put the top back on the master cylinder. Now we can start bleeding our brakes. We'll start at the right rear of the vehicle, followed by the left rear, followed by the passenger front, and finishing off with the driver's front. We'll be using an 11mm wrench, and it's good to use a receptacle with a hose to catch any of the fluid. I have an assistant in the vehicle, and I'll have them pump the brakes.
Hold it.
With the assistant holding their foot on the brake, we can go ahead and break this loose. You can tighten that back down and have them pump the brakes again. Repeat this process until there's no more air bubbles in the line. We can remove our hose from the bleeder screw and remove our wrench. We'll clean up this area with a little bit of brake parts cleaner. And we'll reinstall the bleeder screw cap. And we'll do the same on the driver's side. Now that we've finished our second caliper, we can go ahead and top off our master. Don't forget your cap. We can attach our hose to the bleeder screw, and we'll use our 3/8 line wrench to loosen this bleeder screw. We can have our assistant in the vehicle pump the brakes.
Holding. Floor.
Pump.
Holding.
We'll repeat this process until there's no more air bubbles in the line. We can remove our hose. You want to be careful not to drip any brake fluid anywhere. If you do get brake fluid on any paint, you want to immediately get some water on it. We'll clean off the brake fluid with a little bit of brake parts cleaner. If you have a bleeder screw cap, you can reinstall it now. We can move over to the driver's front, complete the bleed, and top off our master. And now that we've bled our brakes, we'll top off the master cylinder back to the max line. Reinstall the cap. Take the vehicle for a test drive. If you have a spongy brake pedal, you're going to want to do the brake bleed procedure again. We can go ahead and torque the lugs to 150 foot-pounds.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.